Welcome to Femme and Furious, a podcast where pop culture meets a feminine framing. I am your host, Julia Rose Portella, and today we are going on a date with Johnny Kavanaugh as we dive into chapters 21 through 30 of Binding 13, Boys of Tommen. We love it. We love being in this world. But before we dive into today's episode, let me tell you how you can support and follow the podcast. Of course, follow anywhere that you get your podcast, literally anywhere. Go comment, like, subscribe, rate, leave a review, all that good stuff. You can also find us over on YouTube for full video breakdowns, Substack for cultural analysis, follow on Instagram and TikTok at FemmeandFuriousPod, and let's dive into today's episode. First and foremost, happy St. Patrick's Day for those of you listening today. Since this book takes place in Ireland, it felt appropriate to say it's one of my favorite holidays, not for the reasons that other people like this holiday because they like it to drink and party a lot of times. Not a big holiday actually in Ireland, but I do love this holiday. I love listening to Celtic music and making soda bread and all the good stuff that comes along with it. I was looking for shamrocks this morning. I couldn't find any, but I've got some carnations upstairs that are slowly turning green as the day goes on. So happy St. Patrick's Day to those listening. If you want to take a feminine spin on today, I will also say happy St. Gertrude's Day, who is perhaps my matron saint, but the matron saint of cats. Both of those are very fitting for today. Just thought I would throw it out there in case you feel like getting festive. So let's start with chapter 21, Closure. It's Shannon's POV. Shannon is still reeling from the argument with her mother and decides that it's time for her to enter her assertive era and give Johnny freaking Kavanaugh a piece of her mind. Feeling brave, she marches her tiny little self up to him and fears rejection, but instead, he sends everyone else away just to hear what little Shannon has to say. Once they're alone, Johnny immediately notices that she's been crying and that something has happened to her cheek. Does Shannon deliver Johnny an earful for being a downright douche canoe the night before? Nope. She tells him that she's actually going to defend him to her mom and to Mr. Twomey. Getting everything off her chest, she dismisses the conversation and exits stage left, vowing to put Johnny Kavanaugh behind her once and for all. When she runs into Ronan in class, she says he's decked out with a busted lip and a black eye, and she knows that this was all thanks to Johnny. In an attempt to make peace and keep the truth from coming out, Mrs. Lynch signs the permission slip, and Shannon, like the river, is able to go to Donegal. So let's talk about some important details from this chapter. Johnny is skeptical and cautious that Shannon is marching up to all of his friends to out him as revenge porn for misbehaving the day before, and is completely shocked and taken aback when she actually apologizes instead. And even then, he doesn't reject her or blow her off, but he does send everybody away. Now, part of that is because Shannon just says, like, I want to talk to you, and there's something in him that I think wants to protect her. That's Johnny's role. He's a protector. But it's also like, let me get my friends all the fuck out of here so that she can say whatever she wants to say and there's zero audience, so there's nothing to be held over my head. But it's amazing how much authority he commands that he can just send everyone in this hallway away. She was like, even people that weren't hanging out with Johnny just like skedaddled and left the hallway when he said, everyone leave. So he really does have a lot of leadership in him, authority in him, star power in him. Like, to whatever end that people are looking to him, they honor what he's asking and they do what he says. And it's really noticeable the deeper we get into the book. Now, Johnny is observant at best, but he is on high alert when it comes to Shannon because he read her file. He knows that she's had problems at school before and he feels overprotective of her, knowing that information. So when he sees that she's been crying and he sees that she's got a mark on her cheek, he's clued in and suspicious. Johnny wants to fix this problem for her. He is a classic male savior stereotype without ever realizing just how fucking deep this issue goes. So from the very first encounter that Johnny and Shannon have together, Shannon says to Johnny, "Save me." And Johnny's like, "Well, do you need saving?" And she nods her head, yes. This has activated a sleeping giant inside of Johnny. It has given him purpose and meaning and something to focus on outside of the rugby pitch. I'm not saying that that's healthy. I'm just saying that's what it is. He needs to be the hero on and off the pitch, and he's very used to the attention that he gets for being the hero on the pitch. So having this purpose, this sense of identity, this sort of completion of who he is outside of rugby is also really critical for a person like Johnny. But because Johnny has read the file without any prior knowledge of who Shannon is before she really came to Tommen, his focus is like tunnel visioned in on problems at school when the problems that she's having are at home. So he's looking for stuff and he's right and he's sniffing on the right track, but he is like one track over, he's adjacent to the problem. He doesn't realize that this problem is something that's happening at home and that she's coming in with it. He thinks that this is something that's happening at school and that he can fix it because we've just seen he commands all of this power. If he's powerful enough to make all of these people in the hallway go away so that him and Shannon can have a moment to talk privately, he knows that there's pretty much no one in the school that he can't like win friends and influence people his way through fixing that problem for Shannon. And multiple times when he says stuff like this, Shannon's like, I want to tell him what the real problem is because I just want to see if he would commit to the bit. I want to see if he would put his money where his mouth is and come fix his problem with my dad. So, Johnny hasn't gotten there yet. It hasn't clicked into place yet. But he does see that there is some sort of problem, that there is something that is escalating, that there is something about her that she's hiding or covering up, and he doesn't know what it is yet. And that's why he's digging to try to figure out what he can do about this. So the exchange in the book goes like this. "Give me a name," Johnny growled, dropping his hands to his hips, "and I'll take care of it." So right away, he's in dad stance, right? Like there's something about the hands on the hips that implies seriousness, commands authority in its own right? Also signifies like annoyance. So he's frustrated with her that she's not complying in his like interrogation of her. And it continues. "What? No, I'm grand," I quickly replied. "I have allergies." That's what Shannon says. "Me too, to assholes and bullshit," Johnny snarled. "Now tell me who made you cry and I'll fix it." So he's frustrated with her. He's calling her essentially a bullshitter. He says, "I'm allergic to assholes," meaning whoever did this to you, whoever marked up your cheek, whoever made you cry. I'm allergic to that. I don't like that. And also, I'm allergic to this bullshit that you're trying to spin to me that this isn't something that happened to you physically or that you weren't crying, that you just have allergies. Like, I'm allergic to the fact that you're bullshitting me right now. Whenever Johnny and Shannon interact together, you can tell that Johnny has not heard the word no many times in his life. And I don't mean in a way where he would like physically, sexually disrespect a woman or a girl. I simply mean that because he's so good at what he does, so dedicated to his craft, he's gained celebrity, he's a local superstar, right? He's played on the senior team. He's this like Irish hero, essentially. Because of that, and because we know that he has this star power, which he says maybe in his very first chapter, where he's like, "Coach isn't going to bench me. The school coach can't afford to bench me. He's not going to bench me. It doesn't matter if they suspend me. That's within his right. But I'm showing up to the pitch because they can't do that. They are not going to take me out of the game." He knows that he can get away with a lot because of his athletic ability. And because of that, you can tell that he's not heard no a lot. He's probably had his pick of women that he's wanted to sleep with, especially when he says, like, I've been with older women. They're more mature. They have less drama. Like all of this stuff. I've been around a lot of older women because of rugby, so he's probably not heard no, gotten a lot of pushback because what Johnny's used to, which I'll talk a lot later about Bella, but is women like Bella who are seeking Johnny out to have some sort of relationship, whether they perceive that it will be romantic or whether it's simply just sexual or otherwise, but they're seeking it out because he's Johnny Kavanaugh, because he has this attachment of his rugby status connected to him, not because of anything else. And that means that a lot of people suck up to him, fawn all over him, have expectations of him that are so wildly different than what he receives from Shannon. And the fact that Shannon has all of these walls, these boundaries, halts like you can't pass go, you can't collect $200, signs up, is frustrating to him. And so he can get a little verbose in the way that he describes it because he wants to fix this problem for her. And even though she's not saying you can or you can't fix it, she hasn't gotten there with him yet. There's not a level of established trust where she confides in Johnny about what's actually going on. And because he is intuitive and not dumb, right? Very smart, very bright kid who can look at her and see, like, she's been crying, she's got something on her face, something happened, like A plus B equals C. He can't let it go. He can't let it drop. He wants to see something through to the conclusion, and it frustrates him that Shannon won't let him. That for whatever reason, he can't respect this boundary. He went through her file without her knowing, and now he's trying to insert himself into this problem that she hasn't invited him into. So it's just an interesting dynamic that we start out, even though they're both crushing on each other like pretty hard at this point. The dynamic between the two of them is really, really interesting. And then to end this little tidbit of the story, Shannon says, for a split second, I debated naming my father just to see if Johnny would follow through on his word and take care of him. So here's the thing. On the opposite end of the spectrum is Shannon, who has a faith in Johnny and a belief in him and looks to him as almost like a life raft at this point, even though they don't really know each other too well, right? Shannon is somebody who uses the concept of a promise to prove somebody's worthiness or prove that there's security in the status of the relationship to a certain degree. So we've been on promise watch since the very beginning of this book. We're gonna have some promise watches today. But even though the words like, do you promise, aren't in there, this almost trap of, I wanted to name my father just to see if he would do what he says, feels very exploitive and like forcing somebody into a false promise. And Shannon does this a lot. She forces people into a false promise to the point where, like, if you promise a child, let's just say, we'll get ice cream after dinner. And I promise I'll take you for ice cream after dinner. I promise I take you for ice cream after dinner. And then after dinner comes and your kid's like putting their jacket on and they're like, let's go. And you're like, oh, I'm sorry. Not today. You are breaking trust with your kid. And every time somebody cannot follow through on a promise that they've made to Shannon, they are breaking her trust for somebody who doesn't trust easily to begin with. So, like, setting Johnny up for this false hope of him following through on something is less about her feelings about what Johnny is and is not capable of or would not do, and more about the depth of her trust issues and her self-worth, really. She's tying her self-worth to these promises, and these promises are very difficult to keep. Not all of them, but a lot of them. Now, also kind of an L on Shannon's part here. Instead of Johnny getting criticized for his bad behavior, Shannon defends him and makes it a point to him that she's going to clear his name, that she's going to clear things up with the principal. She's going to make sure her mom doesn't cause any trouble for him. And of course, Johnny didn't do anything intentionally wrong during their argument last night. But intent and impact are two different things. That's why they say the road to hell is paved with good intentions. When it comes to hurting Shannon on the rugby pitch, he shouldn't have been threatened with immediate suspension, especially because it's clear to us from subtext that He doesn't get into a lot of fights at school. He's got immaculate grades and he is like the star rugby player. So this seems like it's a one-off offense. It's not like Johnny's been dragged down into the office every other week for bullying. He's a good kid. You can tell that he's a good kid. He likes to keep to himself. His other friends go out drinking. He doesn't. His parents trust him to stay home alone for weeks on end and get his homework done and, maintain the house and maintain his commitments. And he's such a dedicated kid with so much follow through. He's responsible. So it's clear that this isn't like an issue where Johnny's been dragged down to the office because he's constantly fighting with teammates, constantly fighting with people at school. Like, this is a one-off issue and it was an accident, genuinely an accident. Anybody on the pitch could attest to the fact that it was an accident. So you have a whole team full of people. I don't know how many people are on a rugby team, but like at least a dozen people plus the coach, who can vouch for Johnny. So, for hurting her, he shouldn't have been threatened with immediate suspension if he talks to her again. That is a ridiculous consequence for the scope of this accident, right? However, when he drives Shannon home the night before, he acted like an incredible asshole. He takes his frustration out on Shannon again and again, and this is a cycle of abusive behavior. And instead of Shannon telling him off for it, she fears for him and his reputation and who he is and how her mother and Mr. Twomey perceive him and insists on telling him that she's going to defend him instead of demanding any sort of respect for apology, for validation about Johnny's behavior the day before. Now, Johnny immediately says he overreacted and handled it badly, but still, this is true for these types of dynamics. Women have to learn to manage and regulate their emotions, while men can escalate their emotions when they're feeling angry, when they're feeling frustrated, when they're feeling upset. They're not trained perhaps or used to or socialized to regulate their emotions in the same way. And so women just canonically manage and regulate their emotions much faster, much better than men. And even when men escalate the issue, they can just apologize for it after. Johnny needs to go to therapy is what really needs to happen. Somebody needs to say, like, these anger issues are not normal anger issues. And something's up with this kid and he needs professional help because Johnny has serious anger problems and he needs somebody to help him manage them, cope with them, regulate them, all of the above. Now, Shannon says she has the gift of diversion and denial. So I just want to say I tried to research this to see if there was like any sort of clinical backing to this. And while I wasn't able to find anything that clinically supports this idea of abuse victims being able to divert people's attention or be, spew denial out into the world and have it be believed, it makes sense that if you are consistently being put into a position where you have to hide the truth, that these would be skills that you naturally home and develop. And I know I'm skipping a little bit ahead to the last chapter, but because we now know why these kids, Shannon and Joey and their brothers, are so afraid to go to the cops or to tell an adult or tell somebody trusted, is because they had been in a group home before and their older brother Darren had been sexually abused. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but now at least we have a little bit of understanding about why. Why is there so much pressure? Why are they trying to hide things? So talk about, it's been a majority of Shannon's life that she's been doing that. It's been a majority of Shannon's life that she's been participating in that behavior. And I just want to bring up here at the end of this chapter, once again, Johnny has hit Ronan and is an act of violence, major violence, that happened on Shannon's behalf. But I continue to beg the question, what happens when there is no one but Shannon left to take this anger out on. I love Johnny Kavanaugh, and I know a lot of people who are reading these books love Johnny Kavanaugh, but I simply cannot host a feminist podcast and not bring up the fact that this behavior is not okay. Him doing that to Ronan is not okay. And if you've ever read Eleanor and Park, this is a book that I'm reading now. Little spoilers for Eleanor and Park. So if you've not read it, just like skip ahead twice. In the book, which is very similar to Binding 13, I'm only 60% through, so the ending could maybe take a completely different spin, but very similar in like themes and context and whatever. At one point, goes to get into a fight with somebody who has been bullying Eleanor. And as this fight is about to break out, Eleanor looks at Park and says, "Is this for me or is this for you? Are you doing this for me? Because I'm not asking for this. And I'd actually like for you to step away." And when the bullying continues to push, like the limit, Park just snaps and can't even process that Eleanor has asked for him to step away. So he does it for him. And that's what it seems like a lot with Johnny. Like now that there's Shannon, she becomes a bridge between his deep anger issues and the ability to act. So we saw him act in all 3 episodes so far that we've done on this show. He acts in the very first stretch of chapters. He is so frustrated, he kicks the ball and knocks Shannon out. In the second stretch of chapters that we just did last week, he gets into this horrific fight with Ronan McGarry. And now in this stretch of chapters, he's going to get into another fight. So we're breaking this book down like 10 chapters at a time, pretty much. And every single stretch of chapters that we've covered, within every 10 chapters so far, there has been an act of violence that Shannon has helped bridge between what is internally going on in Johnny and what is happening externally where he's able to take action on it. And I just want to be aware of this because once again, I don't think that Johnny's behavior is appropriate. And I know that these books are beloved and I don't think that Johnny's a bad guy. I simply think that we're supposed to look at how angry he is. I don't think that just because he is our MMC, we should turn a blind eye. And I know that a lot of people who love books can turn a blind eye to their book boyfriends because the behavior is supposed to be morally gray. But we're talking about teenagers here. And we're talking about a coming of age story. And we are talking about trauma, especially cyclical trauma, ancestral trauma, familial trauma that passes on. And Shannon's whole life has been cycles of abuse that she's witnessed between her mother and her father. And now she is participating in her own way in the cycle of abuse with Johnny, even if the abuse is not physical. All abuse starts somewhere. And does that mean this will be how their dynamic consistently is? No. But I think that there is something in this go around of reading this book that I'm like, whoa, I don't know if I felt this strongly about it last time, but I definitely feel this strongly about it now. Okay, let's move on to chapter 22, Borrowed Time, Johnny's POV. Playing injured is catching up to Johnny, and he has to lie to his academy coaches to prevent from getting any more medical scans. Johnny and Troy Bolton, 2 boys who need to get their head in the game but can't because of a girl. Whereas I once asked my at-the-time boyfriend if I'd be on his mind with 8 seconds left in overtime, a la the phrase song, and he said no. So, young Julia would have loved Johnny Kavanaugh. Gibbs knows that he's down and out after a 4-page text rant from Johnny and insists that they go out drinking to blow off some steam. The mantle of limp watch passes from Shannon to Mrs. Kavanaugh to Gibbsy, who informs Johnny that he is, in fact, limping. Caving to Johnny's will, Gibbsy sets up the PlayStation for the night while reassuring Johnny that he is going to make the U20. Now, all I have to say about this particular stretch of chapter is that Gibbs is such a good friend. He knows to look beyond what Johnny is saying at face value. He does not take it for what it is and reaches to the root cause of whatever Johnny's foul mood is about. And that is whether or not he's going to make the team, since this chapter starts with Johnny saying this has been his dream since he was 6 years old. And now, because of this injury, he has such a deep fear that this dream is going to slip through his fingers and he's not going to be able to play, that he's not going to be good enough, that he's not going to be match fit. So much of his worth is wrapped up in rugby. And Gibbs knows to like slice off the fat, trim off the fat of these conversations and be like, okay, Johnny, let's get to the heart of what really matters here, which is like, you're gonna make the team. You're gonna make the team. You've played with the senior team twice already. So you're gonna make the U20s team. All right, chapter 23, X's and hell knows, Johnny's POV. Johnny's dream turns from metaphoric to literal as he recalls a dream with Shannon watching him play on the senior team in Dublin before the dream turns into a bitter nightmare, setting Johnny on edge. Making matters worse, Bella decides that today's the day that she's going to approach Johnny and attempt to work things out. Feigning concern for him, Bella asks about his leg and drops not so subtle hints that she'd like to, on no uncertain terms, have her guts rearranged by Johnny once again. Johnny calls her out for this, saying that Bella is only interested in him because of his fame. Going even further, he calls her out for deciding to go for second best with Cormac, but Bella pushes on a very tender piece of Johnny that is attached, nay, obsessed, with Shannon. Bella sets her sights on making Johnny and now Shannon's life a living hell. And as if summoned by all of the drama, Shannon appears just in time for Johnny to storm off and run smack dab right into her. Now, Johnny says that his dream feels like a warning, and it is, because the dream starts out great. He's made it, and then Shannon starts crying, and he looks down, and he's got no legs, and he wakes up, and he has to, like, keep patting his legs. He's like, I feel like this dream is a warning. Yes, hello. Johnny's very intuitive. We're going to talk a little bit about intuition a little later on. But even with this, but the dream is very clear. Like, Johnny, take care of this medical issue or you're really not going to be able to play. You're not going to have legs. Now, is this issue going to go so far as to like, he's probably not going to have legs? No, like he's not going to need to be amputated because his adductor isn't healing right. Okay. However, it is a warning that like, you won't be able to play at all if you don't get this issue fixed. So he feels like it's a warning. This dream is setting him on edge. It's like the worst day to manifest Bella coming in to have this conversation. Johnny even says he feels like Shannon could save him. And when I was reading this, I was like, okay, that's a really interesting phrase because his worth is so derived from his ability to perform on the pitch. And that's not to say that that's the truth of the matter, that that's the only value or his only worth, because we know that Johnny is a wonderful friend, a wonderful son, a wonderful student. So this is something that's happening as a part of his internal struggle. And Shannon can save him by offering up the ability to see his value and his worth outside of rugby, especially because Shannon could care less about it. She doesn't care. She didn't even know who he was. Had no idea. Everyone else knows who Johnny Kavanagh is. She doesn't. She didn't care. She's like, I think you play rugby, right? Like, you seem pretty good. I see what the hype's all about. And he's like, no, I played for the senior team. Like, I played for our country. She has no idea. And she doesn't care. She doesn't treat him any differently because of his celebrity. In fact, where that might be a turn on for a lot of other girls, it's actually problematic for Shannon, as we see in this stretch of chapters. So essentially, when he says, I feel that Shannon could save me, he's saying, I feel that she could save me from myself. This like self-made prison that I've put myself in that has like nothing but rugby and my status about rugby around this. Like if I don't have rugby, I have nothing. And Shannon can help him with that. So let's talk about Bella and Johnny. Bella's concern for Johnny is superficial, and she's using her sexual prowess as a means to get ahead, and can we blame a girl? No, not really. But do we like this behavior? Also no. So here's a quote from this chapter. Johnny says, Bella didn't know the ins and outs of my surgery, only that I had a procedure done at Christmas. When I told her that I would be out of action for a while, her biggest concern was how soon I would be back on the pitch, whether or not I'd get to play for Ireland in the summer, and when did I want to fuck again. So, not like, hey, are you in pain? How was your holidays? Are you going to be able to celebrate? Everything good? Can I get you anything? Right? So, especially later in this, chapter when Bella is like, so what have we been doing for the last year? When all of this is so fake to Johnny, who's not really fake. He can kind of accept things at face value, and he's accepted that his relationship with Bella is just this, like, hey, we just have sex, like we just hook up and that's fine. But Johnny calls out this behavior with Bella. Now, we already know from earlier that Johnny is allergic to assholes and bullshit. And so this conversation with Bella, where she's bullshitting Johnny for a whole different set of reasons than Shannon was, where like Shannon is essentially denying that she's hurt or that she's been crying for her own perceived safety. Whereas like Bella is trying to scam her way through the system. This is something that's never going to work on Johnny because he is so loyal. He values loyalty. He values honesty. And he tells us this again and again and shows us again and again. He says, now, I got that at no point during the time that Bella and I had been messing around had we ever been anything remotely serious, but I still felt betrayed by the Cormac thing. In my eyes, it was shady as fuck on both of their parts, and I would never go off with one of her friends. I had enough respect for her to show her that decency. Obviously, Bella didn't have the same level of respect for me. And then, as their conversation continues, he says to her, why don't you just tell it straight, Bella? You fucked off with Ryan because you thought I wasn't going to be match fit. You saw I was out on injury. You thought I wouldn't make it back in time for the summer campaign, so you went for the next best thing to be safe. And he finishes this argument by saying, go on back to Cormac and pray he makes it up the ranks in the academy so he can take you to all those fancy award parties you want to attend. He is your only shot at getting there now, Bella, because we're done. So this entire conversation, is Bella trying to ask about him, see how he's feeling about them. It's been a couple of weeks. Maybe we'll be able to hook up again. It's not that serious with Cormac, right? Spewing kind of like lie after lie. I wasn't with him then. I'm with him now. All of this stuff because now that Johnny is back to playing rugby, for school at least, and they've just had the schoolboy shield game, and he's just been photographed in the national papers with Shannon, Bella's like, why not? Why not shoot my shot again? Why not see? So typically, we would put this under the category of gold digger, and I am going to do a longer article on this on Substack. So hang tight with it because the gold digger archetype is really fascinating, actually. It's a character, traditionally female, who engages in romantic relationships primarily for financial gain and for social status rather than for affection, which is obviously what's happening with Bella. It's very clear that she doesn't want this kind of love or attention or affection or romance from Johnny. She wants to be taken to the award galas and like the parties. They are often portrayed in media as glamorous, manipulative, and calculating. This character uses seduction to secure wealth from older or from wealthy partners. Now, Johnny has money, his family has money, but like when girls like Bella look at Johnny, they see a future rugby contract with like dollar signs over his head. I went a little bit deeper with this and found out that the term gold digger didn't actually start as this like cartoonish insult that we throw around today. It really has some pretty deep roots. Starting in the early 20th century, was a slang term that popped up in storytelling and became more popularized around like 1910, 1911. It gained a lot of tractions through works like The Ne'er-Do-Well, and then later in the play The Gold Diggers. Now, back then, she wasn't a villain. She wasn't manipulative. She was a figure of fascination. She was a woman that was navigating power and survival in a world that didn't have a lot of options. And this is so true for so many stories that we tell about women, right? They don't have the same economic power or prowess as men, historically speaking. Now it's very different. I actually think that every woman I know out earns every man I know. And that just is a testament to how fucking wonderful women are. Back then, though, especially by the time we hit the 1930s, we have films like The Gold Digger in 1933. And the phrase gold digger has evolved into something closer to a Depression era heroine at this time. So these women weren't just chasing luxury for sport, which is more how we see it perceived today in today's media. In the 30s, the phrase gold digger, particularly from the movie, was women using their feminine wiles to survive the economic devastation that was the Depression. So if you want more on this, I'm going to do it like a fem frame over on the Substack so you can go take a peek, okay? They both feel like they've been used. Bella's like, you were using me for sex, and Johnny's like, you were using me for status. And both of those things can be true. And that brings us to chapter 24. I'm taking you home. Shannon's POV. Shannon feels a storm brewing and is afraid to leave school and head back home. Instead, she bumps straight into Johnny, which only heightened her anxiety and drives her to a full-on throw-up spell in the middle of the school hallway. Luckily, it's empty. Well, except for Johnny, who naturally chased right after Shannon. Johnny rides the wave with her, holding her hair, rubbing her back, before spotting a bruise on her neck and demanding to know what happened and where she got it from. Then, despite all the nonsense that's happened between them, Johnny throws his coat over her shoulders and insists on taking her home. So some important details from this chapter. Shannon calls the cops on her own parents for domestic disturbance just to have the police come so her father wouldn't hurt her pregnant mother. So we'll just let that sink in. Her father convinces the police then that Marie was having a pregnancy-related tantrum. It was giving lobotomized for hysteria. Lobotomized for period pains. Like, what? Who is leaving because the police could be convinced that it was a pregnancy-related tantrum, when surely there have been calls to this house for domestic disturbance before. But I digress. After this whole ordeal, Teddy has left for the night, but comes back the next day and he's got flowers and a promise to Marie that he'll never do it again. Marie constantly takes him back because this is a part of the cycle of abuse that she's in, and Shannon fucking hates her for it. Hates her for it. As somebody who was in an emotionally abusive relationship myself, you don't even realize what it does to your psyche until you are so far out of it that that piece of you starts to come back. So I used to wonder and maybe even judge women who would be stuck in these relationships. But when you're in a relationship like this, it's like taking the self that you know, shrinking it down to the size of a Polly Pocket, and then Inception style, like opening a safe in your mind, shoving it in, closing it. That's how it feels. You are so separated from yourself and your rationale. All you can think about is just trying to stay safe in the situations that you're in. And this is coming from somebody who is in an emotional abusive relationship. It wasn't even physical. There was never any physicality. It was all mental. It was all emotional. So I can't even imagine what it's like to suffer through that in such a physical capacity that you're so disconnected, mind, body, and spirit. Okay, sorry if that was a little heavy, but we're moving on. One of the things that I love about this scene is that Johnny takes care of Shannon in a way that's actually quite feminine. And I love that Johnny can go between these different roles. There is something so tender and so soft about him, even though he's strong and big and tall and commanding and powerful and, all of these amazing things that Johnny brings to the table. And yet he sinks down beside her, holds her hair back when she throws up. He's rubbing her back gently. And then when she's finished, he's like, I will get somebody to clean this up. Don't worry about it. You don't clean it up. I'm going to get somebody to clean it up. Don't worry. You just hang out here. So I love this like little domestic piece of Johnny. And I love that he likes to take care of her in these ways of like, I want to get you food. I want to buy you a Coke. I want to hold your hair, right? So I love all the dynamics of Johnny. And I love that we get to see this like very nurturing piece of him show up in this way. Okay, let's move on to chapter 25, Trouble, Johnny's POV. Johnny drives Shannon home but can't seem to reach her, noting that she's lost somewhere in her head, and he's too afraid to push and make her more upset. When Shannon decides to go in, Johnny starts worrying but feels unsure of where that feeling is coming from, so he decides to act on it and asks Shannon to come with him instead. Now, here are some important details from this chapter. There's a quote from Johnny. He says, I unintentionally hurt Shannon Lynch again. So once again, Johnny's anger, even if it was directed at Bella, causes him to storm off. He's not thinking straight. And because he's had this fight with Bella and it causes him to storm off, Shannon is once again the recipient of the consequence of Johnny's brute force. Even if it's not directed at her, once again, even if it's not intended, the fact that he is so much bigger than her physically that just rounding the corner and bumping into her does nothing for him. He doesn't mention at all what it does for him, but it causes her to literally fall down on her ass, which is what she says. So this is a pretty big deal. Now, once again, we are at another incident where Johnny did not intend to hurt Shannon, and yet Shannon is hurt. We also have a promise watch here. Johnny promises not to tell anyone she threw up at school. So we will see if that is a promise kept. Okay, let's talk about Johnny's intuition, because intuition is something that tends to be feminized, even though, personally speaking, I believe that everybody possesses it. But Johnny has a really strong gut knowing or gut feeling about something. And when it comes to Shannon, a part of that is between his observation of her bruises, reading her file and being able to click things into place, and these little snippets of things that she's said or that others have said to him about her or her family. Like, he knows that something is going on. He's just looking under the wrong rocks for the wrong clues. He's thinking it's a school related issue, but primarily it's a home related issue. And he has a strong sense of intuition. And when he acts on it, he often makes these amazing calls versus when he acts on pure emotion, like he does when he's storming away with Bella, and people, primarily Shannon, get hurt. Right now, he does not want to let Shannon get out of the car. There is something about his intuition that is screaming at him, like, don't let that happen. And he tries to logisticize himself out of it, but he can't. He's like giving himself the laundry list of reasons why he should just let her go. He's like, you have practice, you can't get involved with this girl, right? He says it directly in this chapter. He says, I have no bleeding clue what's happening to me. I just know that my gut is telling me not to leave you right now. Now, he doesn't say that and vocalize it to Shannon, but he does have this internal dialogue with himself where he's trying to talk himself out of it and can't, because his gut reaction is so strong. And this happens all the time with intuition, by the way. We will get a gut feeling about something, and then we will tell ourselves like why that thing logically doesn't make any sense. But your gut, intuition, energy, whatever you want to call it, doesn't operate on logic. It's something that you can't see. It's something that you can't fully understand. It's something that's there to provide you with this extra sensory experience to enhance your quality of life, let's just say. if we're putting it simply, I don't know. I have a spiritual podcast in development, so hang tight. But he can't logisticize himself out of it. Like, the further she keeps stepping away from the car, the more he's like, I've got to do something right now about this gut feeling. I feel so awful about dropping her home. Think about the way that these two people have started their day. Johnny's had this visceral, scary nightmare about losing his legs to his injury, then had a fight with Bella. Shannon called the cops on her parents the night before and then feels internally like a storm is brewing. I know I'm just going to get home and like something's going to happen. So both of these people started their day with like, something's not right about today. And they find comfort in each other in this moment through Johnny's gut reaction to like, I'm not letting her go back in that house for whatever reason. He doesn't even know why he feels that way. He's intuitively picking up on the fact that the bruises that he's seen around her neck are from being choked, that the mark on her cheek is from being slapped with the paper that Johnny and her were on, that she's crying because she got into a fight with her mother over Johnny. Like, he's so intuitive, he's picking up on it. He just thinks that these are all school related issues. He doesn't realize that it's a home related issue, which would maybe strengthen this gut feeling or validate this feeling of like, I shouldn't be dropping this person home. I'm not going to do that. So we love Johnny's intuition. All right, chapter 26, The Boy's a Hero, Shannon's POV. Johnny takes Shannon to Biddy's and buys her dinner. Ladies, we are in first date territory. Now, Johnny and Shannon are giving opposites attract. Johnny's large, he's athletic, he eats a ton of food, he keeps it clean, he's confident. Shannon, on the other hand, is tiny and timid and likes a sweet treat, as is the right of every girly pop, and is really unsure of herself. They both have stuff to learn from each other, and that's very clear over the course of this dinner that they have at Biddy's. Shannon feels intimidated by all of the attention that Johnny receives, and the secondhand attention that she's receiving from being with him. When Shannon is spotted by her bullies from BCS, Johnny leans in and reminds her that she's safe. Laying it on a little thick, Johnny, but as he said himself, best not to do things half-assed. I love this quote from Johnny where he says that he doesn't do anything half-assed. It's like the second that he decided he was invested in Shannon, he was all chips in. Something that's really sad to me from this chapter is when Shannon says that the smell of chocolate gives her a rush of endorphins, and Johnny says that he trains 6 hours a day, so he doesn't need a supplement for endorphins, which is true, but Shannon does. She needs those sweet treats to be able to reduce her stress levels even just a little bit, whatever they may be. There's also a lot of fat shaming in this chapter, quite frankly. The discussion of weight, both his and her, is so early 2000s, it hurts. Like, it really puts you right back in that time zone when we were just like, nothing tastes as good as skinny feels. Now, Shannon also says, I'm not like other girls, which in the early 2000s was like a compliment. But I hate this now. Saying that you weren't like other girls was this thing that we did, or a lot of people did. I certainly did it. It was like being a girl was embarrassing, or that things that we liked were so wrong. So we wanted to be different. We didn't want to be like every other girl. But everything about girls is amazing to me. And being like other girls is incredible. So I'm glad that this narrative has changed, or at least is changing. Like, the narrative has shifted now to modern days that girls that said this back then would now be called a pick-me today. Like, my sisters wouldn't say, I'm not like other girls. They would say that girls who say, I'm not like other girls, are pick-me's. And whereas before, when you would say, I'm not like other girls, and it was supposed to be this compliment or this testament to how digestible you were to men and the patriarchy, when women and girls do that now, they are called pick-me's, as in like, you're hoping the patriarchy picks you, ew, disgusting. So I just think that's an interesting contrast, but again, like, put me right into that early 2000s headspace. We also have a promise watch here where he says, you're safe, I promise. Chapter 27. Keep the head, Johnny. While Shannon is shaking with terror, Johnny is shaking with fury. Who's scarier when they're mad, Johnny Kavanagh or Bruce Banner? Johnny escorts Shannon out of the bar, but not before turning around and laying into the boyfriend of Sierra, the girl who was Shannon's biggest bully at BCS. Johnny calls Sierra out for cutting Shannon's hair and feels vindicated when her face turns red as a form of admission. Not wanting to end their time together, Johnny invites Shannon to a movie. So here's some important details from this chapter. Johnny says he's not a reactor, which made me laugh out loud as I was rereading this. We've never seen that side of him. We've never seen him not react to whatever his emotions are doing. We've only ever seen him react when his emotions are heightened, which they are right now, because Shannon's involved. So Johnny does not have a clear perception of himself, or at least this is something that was not a normal part of his behavior until Shannon, which then maybe he does have a clear read on it, but we're a couple months into the story at this point. Johnny's been reacting through every single one of them since the first day that we saw him on the pitch. Now, again, let's pay attention to the language that Johnny uses because it is so consistently angry. So just in this chapter, this is not even all of the language. This is just a few from a few sentences. Fury, killing someone, blowing a head gasket, rage, vengeance. Like Johnny seriously has deep-rooted anger problems. He can taste his anger, he says in this chapter. I'm not going to get off of this horse. Johnny's angry. We can't ignore it. Don't turn a blind eye to it. It's not healthy. This is not healthy. This is not a healthy amount of anger. Also in this stretch of chapters, he calls a girl a bitch, and men calling girls or women bitches of any kind is really just a hard pass for moi. Now, last chapter, Johnny promised that she's safe, which technically has remained physically true. But it didn't stop Sierra from making a comment about Shannon being a whore and chasing Johnny for his money. So, promise half kept? Question mark? You guys can let me know how you feel about that, whether or not it's a promise kept or a promise broken. Send me an email at femeandfuriouspod@gmail.com. Now, when Johnny goes back in, he calls Shannon his girlfriend. Pretty significant. They barely know each other, but to him, he's already so invested in Shannon that this is the only natural progression of their relationship. And this is from a boy who has stated again and again that he has no time for relationships, but with Shannon, he is willing to blow off rugby commitments to make time. His priorities are slowly shifting, and his level of commitment to Shannon is to the point where he goes back into this group of people and just instantly is like, who called my girlfriend a whore? He could have said his friend, he could have said anybody, but he throws his arms around Shannon. He gives them like a physical romantic context so that this guy that's staring at her, Sierra's boyfriend, will stop staring at her because can't you take the hint? I've got my arm around her, bro. Like, he likes Shannon. He has romantic feelings for her. He's still admitting it to himself, but the most natural thing to him is to call her his girlfriend. Now, Johnny says he won't hit a girl, so he hits the boyfriend. And when the guy's friend won't jump in to defend him, he calls him a coward. He says that him and Gibbs jump into each other's fights all the time for each other on each other's behalf. And that again is just like the Three Musketeers attitude between Gibbs and Johnny. We're missing a third musketeer there, but it doesn't matter. You get the idea. When he starts hurting the guy, he's gotten a couple blows in, Sierra insists that he's hurting him. And Johnny points out that she knows right from wrong. How ironic. So you do know when somebody is being hurt. So you do know that that's wrong. Just like he points out the hypocrisy of Ronan telling him to back up, despite not listening when Shannon asked for the same. Johnny makes it a point to use intellect and to dictate that through language to the people that he needs to direct the message to in order to complement, let's just say, the physical component of what is actually happening. And this has happened now twice with both Ronan and with this guy, unnamed guy, that we love an unnamed guy, by the way, that is Sierra's boyfriend. Also, just pointing out again, Shannon is the trigger for Johnny's violence here. So he says to this guy after he fights him, make sure your girlfriend gets it. Because the guy's like, I get you loud and clear. And he's like, yeah, I don't really care. Make sure your girlfriend gets it. As if men are the keeper of their ladies. Like, ew, Johnny, what kind of behavior statement is this? It gave me the ick. I was like, make sure your girlfriend gets it. Or as if this boy has enough values or decency to stop her from doing this now when he didn't just stop it 10 seconds ago or make a comment about it 10 seconds ago when Shannon was passing. He obviously has no loyalty to this girl, Sierra, because despite the fact that they've been dating for however long, he's made multiple ogle passes at Shannon to the point where they physically beat her up. Shannon is sitting under Johnny's arm in biddies and he's still staring at her. So he's obviously not loyal to her. And if he knew there was 28 pages of incidents, 14 pages front and back, that happened with Sierra being the primary target of most of these attacks, he knows that she does it because he's like, oh God, what the fuck did you do to her now? So if he didn't care all those other times, I really don't think he's going to care now or make a point to tell her to stop, even if he could. The bartender then says that Johnny could have killed the kid. So Johnny possesses a violence that teeters on excessive. This isn't even just like, hey, I got to punch into this guy's face. The guy, Liam, that runs the bar, that owns the bar, says that Johnny could have killed him. I don't think that's metaphoric. Okay? I think that's meant to be taken literally. Shannon then thanks him for buying her 2 Cokes and a bowl of soup. And Johnny, who was so used to being used by girls for his money and his status, is so refreshed by this. He's like, that wasn't dinner. That wasn't me taking you out. That wasn't me spending money on you. And for Shannon, who's so used to starving and scraping, she's genuinely grateful that she just had this big bowl of soup and a meal. So to be the recipient of this physical and emotional care that Johnny has displayed today is critical for somebody like Shannon. Shannon then says to Johnny that her parents are protective and she's not really allowed to go anywhere. Like, she's not allowed to go to the movies, but I'm going to do it anyway because I want to. This is obviously a selective word on her behalf that we know as the audience is less about them being protective and more about them being controlling so that she's not out there trying to avoid her father's bad behavior. And Johnny just assumes that this makes sense because she's been so deeply and profoundly bullied for her whole life that, like, I would be protective if that was my kid too. Like, he just draws this natural conclusion, which is, again, very astute of him. Only it's not the full story. It's not all the details. Now, this is an extended scene, chapter 27 and a half, let's just say. There's no number to it, but it's called Booster Seats and Beating Hearts. It's got Shannon and Johnny's POV in there. Spotted. Johnny and Shannon going to a movie. How many ways could an impromptu first date be ruined? By old bullies? By friends of lovers past? By your big brother? By your friend showing up? Having to leave early to get home so that you don't get the shit beat out of you by your father? All of the above? Either way, dropping Shannon home, Johnny confirms once again that she'll be safe, question mark, before leaving Shannon for the weekend. Here's some important details from this little stretch of chapter. Shannon may not understand what's going on at the movie theater with this exchange between Kelly and Johnny, but Kelly is obviously Bella's friend who works at the movie theater and is trying to sabotage the date or make a point to Johnny like this is fucked up because of Bella, when meanwhile Bella's with Cormac. They've already had this argument earlier that day at school. This is still the same day that Johnny and Bella had this argument, and now he's out with Shannon after telling her, like, leave Shannon alone, I'm not seeing her, and now he's going on a movie date with her to the cinema. So he then says to her in this stretch of chapter, yeah, Shan, you're good for me. Which is not only a Freudian slip, But he's also starting to be comfortable enough to nickname her Shan. Like, he's not calling her Shannon like the river anymore. He is shortening her name to this thing that we've only heard her friends or Joey call her, people that are in her intimate circle. He's becoming a part of her intimate circle. Now, Johnny's friends show up to the movie and call Shannon his little girlfriend. So now twice in the span of like a few hours, Shannon has been referred to this way. Once by Johnny when he goes back to the bullies and says like, who talked about my girlfriend like this? And now once by his friends who know, because they all play rugby with him, he's got this weird fascination with her. So Shannon takes note that he doesn't deny it. She's like, he doesn't deny that we're on a date. He doesn't deny that I'm his girlfriend. So good for Shannon. Johnny also admits in this stretch of chapter that his feelings for Shannon are addictive. And that this is exactly what I love about these coming of age stories. And I love when authors get it right, because first love is addictive. It is intoxicating. And the way that Johnny continues to describe it, it's how that feeling can inhibit your critical thinking skills. He's blowing off rugby, the thing that he loves the most. He's been dreaming about doing professionally since he was 6 years old, right? Shannon knows that staying out without telling anybody that she's going to be staying out is going to result in a physical beating from her father, but they're falling in love. So that part of their brain numbs out a little bit. It is the same way that you get with any drink or drug. That's how love feels, especially young love. So I love that Johnny says that it's addictive. He feels obsessed, because that is that feeling of young, fresh love. Okay, chapter 28, Substitute Parents, Shannon POV. It's Saturday, and Shannon is on Sean duty after taking a major beating from her father the night before. Marie stepped in to defend her, ordering Teddy to leave and never come back. Instead, Marie has been missing in action ever since. Shannon then spends the day dividing and conquering parental duties with Joey. You know, normal teenage stuff. Not too much going on in this chapter, but I loved this quote where she says, "Soon he would be back, promising heaven and delivering hell." It's a fucking chilling line about her father that I think summarizes so clearly, again, the idea of promises broken, what gets delivered when the promise is broken, and really the depth in which we can get caught into the cycle of abuse. Chapter 29. Shifting Jackets, Johnny's POV. Johnny's body continues to break down, and finally his academy coach catches on, sending him to the medics, where Johnny fails all of their exams. Johnny's excused from all academy activities for 3 weeks, which is when his next medical exam is set for, but he is spiraling. Johnny's panicking. Feeling like his dreams are slipping through his fingers, Johnny blames himself for his body's inability to heal. He hits his emotional, mental, and physical breaking point, but Gibbs insists on them going out. Johnny could be cajoled, except for the fact that he's desperate to avoid Bella at all costs. Gibbs suggests he gets a girlfriend to halt Bella in her tracks, but Johnny states that he's way too busy. When Gibbs drags Shannon into the conversation, yeah, too busy even for Shannon? Johnny agrees to go out just to shut him up. So there's this exchange between Gibbs and Johnny in this chapter that I want to read because I really, really love it. So it starts with, "I got your text about your coach sending you home today. And I have to be honest with you, lad, I'm relieved they're starting to see through your bullshit. I'm fine. It doesn't hurt, Sherrod." So I'm just going to pause here and say, remember when Johnny said he was allergic to bullshitters? There's a part of him that's calling himself out because he knows, and Shannon knows also, which is why he got so uncomfortable, that he's not okay. That this medical injury is not how it's supposed to be recovering, that it's getting worse instead of better, even after the surgery. And so despite the fact that Johnny is allergic to bullshit and assholes, Johnny is an asshole over his injury, is bullshitting himself and trying to bullshit just about anybody who will fall for whatever he's saying so that he doesn't get pulled and he can play. And a lot of his, like, I need to fix a problem, I need to get something fixed, I need to fix something right now, that he directs towards Shannon could really be used internally to say, like, I need to fix this problem for me. I need to go to a doctor. I need to get cleared, and then I can get match fit. It's ahead of Shannon's birthday, which is March 13th. And he got surgery December 16th. So it's been 2.5 months that his injury isn't getting any better. If he would have said a month into this, hey, this doesn't look like it's progressing, and needed another surgery, he would have been a month and a half closer to being match fit. Instead of, the longer he kicks the can down the road and denies that there's a problem and bullshits himself and tries to bullshit everybody around him, the more that he's cutting it close to this deadline where he's making a self-fulfilling prophecy that he's not going to be able to play. This conversation with Gibbs is like, the facade is breaking. He can't get one over on the medics anymore. He can't get one over on his coaches anymore. And now he's going to have to start dealing with this problem head on. So it continues. Wow, I arched a brow. Thanks a lot, friend. Don't give me that shit, Gibbsy shot back. You know I want you on that team in June more than anyone, but not at the risk of permanent damage. He shook his head. It's too high a price to pay. You don't get it, I mumbled, regretting the venting text I'd sent him earlier. No, in all honesty, I probably don't get it, Gibbsy replied. I've never been invested in anything like you are with rugby. But I see what you're doing to yourself. I see that, Johnny. So I love this exchange between the two of them, because while Gibbs maybe doesn't understand the pressure that Johnny's under, he does understand that the consequences for Johnny would be long-term. And because he wants to see his friend succeed and accomplish all of his dreams, he's like, hey, what you're doing isn't healthy, and the long-term repercussions, like, the worst case scenario is you don't play this year, but you will still play professional rugby. The worst case scenario is you continue to ignore this problem and you don't get either. You don't get either of those things. So he doesn't understand Johnny's fear at its base level of, like, what the fear is, because he doesn't invest in anything the way that Johnny is invested in rugby, but he understands fear itself, and he understands that Johnny is experiencing that on a pretty deep level. And so he comes in as a really good friend. So Gibbs then has to force Johnny to, like, be a teenager and have other priorities. You don't have academy training in the morning. You can't play rugby tomorrow. Guess what? You can go out and get drunk with your buddies, a normal thing that 17-year-old boys do. Okay? So I love this because we see that Gibbs has to really force and push Johnny to go out and be a teenager. Well, Shannon does this naturally. Shannon gets into Johnny's car and he's like, rugby be damned. Let's go to Biddy's. Let's have some soup. Let's go to the movies. Let's keep hanging out. Like, do you want to just go for a spin in my car? Like, he just wants to spend time with her and blow off his other commitments, which also isn't great. But when you're so dedicated to something that you're not getting a normal teenage experience, which Johnny has not had a normal teenage experience, he's getting a taste of it. Whereas, like, Gibbs has to literally force him to go out with him, consistently forcing him to be a teenager, be 17. You're only 17 once. So I love their dynamic. I really, really do. I love the friendship that Gibbs and Johnny have cultivated together. Last chapter, Will manage Shannon. Joey is racked with guilt that he wasn't able to defend Shannon from their father, but Shannon is glad that he got time with Aoife at the cinema. Now, either of their parents around, Joey tries to square away the family financially, pulling out his wallet and dumping all of his money, €87 and 36 cents, on the table. Now it's Shannon's turn to be racked with guilt, feeling like their parental problems would simply go away if she was gone. Is your heart breaking for Shannon like the river yet? The chapter ends with Joey diving into the Lynch family lore, giving Aoife a deep dive into their origin story. So in this chapter, we finally get some backstory on Darren, who is Shannon and Joey's older brother. He's 23 right now. He was 11 when they were in a group home. He was sexually abused. Joey and Shannon went to a home where they were loved and cared for and had a really good time. But Darren was sexually abused in a foster home, and because Marie had put them into voluntary care and because it was considered medically related, she was able to gain custody back after this incident had happened. Joey also claims that Teddy, his dad, wasn't so bad before Darren was sexually abused, but that after this event happened, Teddy couldn't cope. He was convinced that that's what had caused Darren to be gay, which Joey is like, if the guy would have known us and spent time with us, he would have known that that's fucking ridiculous. And that's when the drinking problem really started to escalate. So obviously the drinking as part of gambling slash abuse, pattern. And then we have this quote from Joey where he says, myself and Shannon have each other. That's it. And you can see in this statement, like just how reliant these two are upon each other and how much they need each other to survive and how they process their emotions and their abuse very differently. But that's it. That's all they have. Joey looks to Shannon and Shannon looks to Joey. They are the only two people in the world who really understand each other because Tyke and Ollie and Sean are younger and Darren's gone. So the only two people that they have are each other, and they need each other to survive emotionally. Shannon also says that she loves Aoife as a sister, but she's also afraid for Joey. She's afraid for herself that Joey's gonna up and leave. She's afraid for herself that Joey's gonna up and leave her. But on the other hand, she's also afraid for Joey that the hope of unconditional love and affection and security, which is what Shannon says, is blinding to kids like her and Joey who have been denied it their whole lives. So she fears losing Joey to Aoife because she knows how quick she would go to somebody that was offering her the same kind of attention. And Johnny is offering her the same kind of attention. So we have a little taste of like why this relationship with Johnny feels addictive to her too in its own way. And that is the end of this stretch of chapters. All right, let's crack open the burn book where we will look at the superlatives for this episode. The Bold and Bothered Award. This award is strictly for the femme and the furious. It's the quote or the moment that really relays feminine rage. And it's Bella approaching Johnny like, where the hell have you been, Loca? Why haven't you called me? And obviously Johnny is also bold and bothered. So this whole conversation between the two of them, just chef's kiss. The Shiro Award. This award goes to the baddie who is the most inspiring or the moment that is the most empowering. And it is Shannon taking care of the entire house, literally cleaning it from top to bottom and taking care of a 3-year-old baby on top of it after getting a raging beating from her father the night before. The Femme Fatale Award, for the most smash the patriarchy moment of the episode. And it's Aoife refusing to take no for an answer when she offers to give Joey money after Marie and Teddy both leave. Speak Your Truth trophy. Best quote or line. Put your head up, Shannon like the river. Honorary heartthrob, because I'm just a girl, okay, and I want to talk about the most swoon-worthy moments. And it is Shannon putting the wallet on Johnny's good leg. I love this moment, but I love that Johnny recognizes it. He acknowledges it. He's like, okay, I noticed that she puts this on my good leg. Sets it down where I'm not going to be hurt. We love that. I love the two of them. I love the relationship they're building. I don't think it's healthy, but I do love it. So anyway, thank you for listening to this week's episode of Femme and Furious. If you like this episode, share it out, tag me in the post, leave a review, all that good stuff. And I will be back on Friday. I have an episode on the first season of the OC. So if you've ever watched The OC, this is one of my favorite shows. I really one day would love to go through it episode by episode. If you've not seen the show in a while, you can totally follow along. It's not a deep dive. It's literally just a chat and a reflection on my life, really, and how this was such a critical text in my life growing up that I did with my friend Kate, who I grew up with. You don't have to be like deep into OC lore, but it's a really fun, funny conversation where we chit chat about the OC and just the first season. I'll be doing other seasons as we go along, but this was So fun and so important to me. Then I'll be back on Tuesday. We're doing 31 through 40. Okay, so go ahead and read. Lots of really good stuff that's coming up in this next stretch of chapters that I'm excited to talk about. And until then, bye, Johnny.